Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another wonderful tasting with the Virtual Tasting Society. I am Vadim Perlovsky, and today we're excited to welcome a grain to glass distillery in Seattle, Spokane, Washington. Spokane, Washington, called Dry Fly. This distillery was first put on my radar when we did a tasting a few months back, and the master distiller there had mentioned Triticale grain. And after doing some research, Dry Fly is kind of leading the way with Triticale, and I'm excited to learn more about the grain and everything else you guys are doing. But yeah, that was kind of my gateway to Dry Fly, and Brandon Bartlett speaks highly of you guys out here, so I know he's got good taste. But we're excited. We have a special guest today. Terry from Dry Fly is one of the co-owners of the brand, and he is your national sales, or what is your title?
Yeah, I do all the sales and marketing for the company. So.
Very cool. So welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to all the attendees and participants today. Anyone who's here for the first time, welcome. The way we do these tastings is we're here to get nerdy. So ask questions, use the chat, participate in the polls. If you feel like unmuting yourself and participating in the conversation, you're welcome to do so. All we ask is that when you're not actively participating, you keep yourself on mute so we don't talk over each other and we don't have background noise and whatnot. So if I do notice that you're not muted and you're not talking, I may mute you. Please don't be offended. Just send me a message and I won't do it again. But in that, have fun, get nerdy, ask questions, enjoy the whiskey, enjoy the conversation, learn a thing or two. And yeah, that said, thank you very much for being here, Terry. Please tell us all about yourself, about Dry Fly, your products. We're happy to learn.
Okay, yeah, so a little history about Dry Fly. So Dry Fly was founded in 2007, and it was founded by my business partner Don Poffenroth and his original partner, a guy named Kent Fleshman. And one worked for Cisco Foods, was a big distributor, and Don worked for a company called Ventura Foods, which was a manufacturer of a lot of dressings and things that they sold to Cisco. And so they were on sort of a corporate junket in Bozeman, Montana, and Kent was being wined and dined by Don. And they were there, and they were lamenting their corporate lifestyles. They were kind of both fed up with what they were doing. And Don's company wanted to move him to LA, to the head office. And there's not a lot of fly fishing around LA, so he wasn't too thrilled about that. And they were, of course, drinking vodka on the trip. They're drinking Grey Goose at the time. And they got to talking, and they were kind of wondering out loud if Grey Goose was really the best vodka the world had to offer, or if something else could be crafted locally from ingredients in the Northwest that would, be better than that. And Don had a little experience in brewing, had been an owner in a company called Spanish Peaks Black Dog Ale in Bozeman, Montana. And so they decided that at the time, craft distilling was just getting started, and they decided that they should open up a distillery. So they came back to Spokane, and they called the Liquor Control Board, try and figure out what it would take to get a license to distill in the state of Washington. Well, nobody had a distillery in Washington since Prohibition. So basically, the Liquor Control Board directed them to the legislature and said, you're going to have to push this through the legislature if you want to create a license that allows distilling in Washington. And so that's what they did. They worked with the local Senator Chris Marr, and they packaged up a bill and took it to Olympia, Washington. And the first time, it failed miserably. And they didn't get enough people on board. And so they were just trying to create a straight up distilling license at that point. And then the next session, they came back and they made it a craft distiller's license with some provisions in it. And the provision that got everybody on board was, they said, you could be a craft distiller in the state of Washington so long as you use 60% or more Washington grown ingredients in your manufacturing process. So if you've ever been to Washington, there's Seattle, the wet side of the state, and then the east side of the state's all about agriculture. And where we're at in particular is just really a little bit north of where a lot of grain is grown. And so when you made it about farming, all the legislators got on board. All these legislators from rural districts were, enamored with the idea that their constituents would be selling more of their products here in the state. And so it got signed into law in 2007, and Dry Fly opened as the first distillery in Washington since Prohibition. And at the time, they were in the first 25 or so, quote, small batch guys around the country that were getting started. So the numbers now are staggering. I think the last time I looked at the American Craft Spirits Association, the count was about 2,250 craft distillers across the country now. So it's really taken off in a big way, and kind of parallel to the craft beer. So hopefully it continues to grow. I came on board with Dry Fly in 2018 and bought Kent out. He was one of the original founders. He did the sales and marketing. And in 2014, he had some esophageal cancer, stage 4. And so it knocked him out of the game for a couple of years. And he just never got kind of his energy back. And he just wanted to retire. He was approaching 60. And so I had just come out of, I was in distribution from the time I was 21 until I was 47. And the last 10 years or so, I had my own company here selling beer, wine, and spirits. And I was a Dry Fly distributor in Washington. And so after I sold that company, and Don called me and said, Kent would really like to retire. Would you be interested in buying him out? And so I came on board June 1st of 2018, which is with my 50th birthday, actually. So I always joke that, what'd you do for your 50th birthday? Oh, I bought a distillery. So it's been kind of a wild ride ever since. We've grown about 5-fold since that time. And like we were talking about earlier, in 2020, we embarked on a distillery expansion that took our capacity from 20,000 max proof gallons annually to 80,000 proof gallons annually. So I'm not sure where Woodinville whiskey is now, but that would put us about on a par with them in terms of production capability. And we also introduced canned cocktails in 2019, which has been a rocket ship for us. And so we added high-speed canning capacity to the facility as well. We can do 100 cans a minute on the canning line. And whereas we used to be able to make about 1.5 barrels of whiskey distillate a day, which is very slow going if you're trying to build a stockpile of whiskey inventory, we can do about up to 10 barrels a day now in our current facility. So it's helped us in a dramatic way start putting more whiskey down so that we can sit on it longer. We would love to sit on everything for 5 years minimum, and we just haven't got to that point because we've been taking it out of inventory for sales, faster than we've been putting it down. And so now with this new facility, that kind of flips that equation upside down. So, barring any other supply chain issues, we should hopefully start to move our age statements forward and start producing more and more whiskey in the coming years, assuming we can get barrels. That's a big, huge issue right now in the industry. I don't know if you're aware of that, but independent state company cut everybody's allocation by 50% for the back half of 2022. So we're looking at other coopers to see if we can find other places for barrels. But yeah, that's kind of Dry Fly in a nutshell. So are you guys tasting? Have you guys started tasting yet?
No, we're waiting for you. Normally the question would be, what order should we go in? Should we just, are we going to taste through each one, or should we drink as we go? Or
no, we can taste through each one. I always start with the 100% wheat whiskey, 90 proof. I think you've got both wheat at 90 and at our cask strength 120.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually start with the 90 proof wheat whiskey.
Okay. So what's the order you want to go in? I'm just going to put it in the chat. We'll start with the wheat.
Start with wheat, and then we generally go to Trit from there, and then go, well, you've got that Cask and Release in there too. So after Trit, I would do Cask and Release, and then the port finish, then bourbon, then the 120 proof cask wheat usually finishes it up.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I generally like
weave wheat all throughout the day.
I generally like to start, with the lower proofs and work your way up to the higher proofs towards the end of the tasting. And I also like to, start from simple to complex, I guess. I don't want to call the wheat whiskey simple, but the other whiskeys like the port finish and the bourbon and some of those other things are a little bit more complex than the straight wheat is.
Makes sense.
So,
Sure.
and for dry fly straight wheat whiskey, it is 100% soft white winter wheat. We get from a single farm called the Wissota Farm, which is about 25 miles south of us in the rolling hills of the Palouse, which is prime wheat growing country. So, then it's
And then,
aged in New American Oak barrels, number 3 char, and that one's only 3 years old. So,
are you using full-size barrels for everything?
oh yeah, we only use 53-gallon New American Oak for primary barrels. We have a bunch of different finishing barrels in the warehouse that we source sherry barrels and cognac barrels and a lot of Washington wine barrels, a lot of Syrah, Cabernet, some other kind of unique things that generally get bottled as single barrel offerings for a store and whatnot. But the primary barrel is that number 3 char New American Oak from Independence State.
So if getting casks is an issue, and for wheat, Triticale, the only one that really insists on having New American Oak is bourbon. Do you see yourself reusing casks in the future? I understand. I'm sure that the New American ones ages faster, so the 3 years gives it more depth. But what's the solution? What do you see for yourself?
Well, Independence Stave has said next year it'll be returning to our full allocation, which is still only 40 barrels a month. But I don't think we would ever change. I mean, we would go and to look to every other cooper out in the market, and there are other places where you can buy barrels. They're just significantly more expensive. So a New American Oak barrel from Independence Stave 2 years ago was about $180. Now a barrel's about 2.25. And I know other distilleries that are paying up to 400 for New American Oak right now. So it's out there. I don't think we would ever stylistically change or production wise change what we do. That would just change, who we are and the style of the whiskey and everything else. So we'll just continue to beat the bushes and find barrels wherever we can and maybe have to eat a little cost on it as well.
Makes sense.
You can buy other oak barrels too. Independent Stave has like a kind of a craft series that they do. We buy some barrels from them that are hybrids that are made from 3 different species of oak. And those have been really, really interesting. Usually we just put wheat whiskey in them, but they're American oak, French oak, and some European oak, I think largely Hungarian. And those are really interesting barrels. And then you can also buy Euro barrels from them that are all Hungarian oak. And those have been interesting whiskeys as well. So stylistically, they're slightly different. I mean, if we had to, we could move to using some of those as well.
So wheat
So
is, yeah, go ahead. I was gonna say wheat's your home base. Tell us more about
yeah,
this.
for sure. I mean, we've been called the wheat obsessed distillery by Whiskey Advocate. And obviously we're in wheat country here. So we do, that's our basic wheat right there, 90 proof. It's soft. It's got a creamy texture to it. It's very friendly and easy to drink whiskey. The older versions of that take on a lot more complexity and become very, very interesting. We do 100% wheat. So, there's a lot of wheat whiskey out there on the market that's basically a bourbon recipe flipped upside down, where it's just predominantly wheat, but there's rye or barley making up the balance of it. Ours is 100% wheat. And so, yeah, we do a lot of things with wheat. We have our regular wheat, our cask wheat, our port finished wheat, our Cask and Release series is largely wheat barrels. Sometimes some Triticale barrels make it into that flow. But yeah, wheat is our big thing here.
And is wheat generally malted, or wheat is not?
Mm-mm. It's not. We get wheat in. Our farmer Mitch, he brings it in a truck now. He used to bring it in these super sacks that were 2,000 pounds a piece. And so it goes through a hammer mill. So it goes into an auger that takes it to a hammer mill that basically turns it into flour. And then it's augered out of the mill and into the first of the two cereal cookers. And at that point, we start, add hot water, start cooking the grains. We put two enzymes in there. So we'll have an enzyme that will help control or gelatinize the starch, start breaking it down, and then another enzyme that'll start the process of converting the starch to sugars. And then after we cook for 2 hours in that first cereal cooker, we transfer to another cereal cooker, continue for another 2 hours. Third enzyme gets introduced there to continue converting starches to sugars. And it takes us now, with our larger size, basically 4 batches to fill one of our fermenters. So that's our standard process. It's a sweet mash process. We don't do any sour mashing at the distillery at all.
Very cool. So I don't think we've talked in the past about, like, in depth about wheat whiskey. And so when I know with barley, right, when you malt it, you get the husks, you get a certain percentage of flour and the grist and all this stuff. What's the like the mashup of wheat? Is it just because, I mean, bread is made out of wheat, right? And it's really good and very neutral. I would assume wheat wouldn't have like the spice of rye and be very like, as on the sweeter side.
Yeah, I definitely think the wheat is definitely soft, and it tends to have more kind of creamy riches to it, and more, I don't know, cereal or vanilla flavors in there. Some of that comes from the oak for sure, but wheat whiskey by itself is I don't want to call it simple, but it definitely is soft and easy.
Yeah, people are tossing it in the chat that it's very yeasty and bready and
Yeah.
a little oatmeal with raisins. Oh, breakfast whiskey if I ever heard of one.
So going wheat, that's because that's what's grown around you, or that's because the decision was we like wheat, let's go for a wheated whiskey? I mean, or was it a combination of the two?
It had more to do really with the founding ethos of using what we had in our backyard to produce world-class spirits. That was the vision. And so, we live in wheat country here in Eastern Washington. So that just made the most sense. There's some rye grown here as well, but it's grown on plots that are, smaller and away from wheat, because wheat farmers hate rye. It's invasive. They don't want it in their wheat fields. So it just made sense for us to do wheat. And the reason we do Triticale instead of trying to do a rye is again, like I said, there's very little rye planted in the state. It's actually considered a Class 2 noxious weed by Washington Department of Agriculture. So Triticale was sort of our solution to have a spicy style whiskey. And it was interesting to work with Washington State University to identify the clone that would work best in the soils of the Palouse. But overall, I think, we were trying to, do things that work with what we had in our backyard, that kind of, you talk a lot about terroir and wine, about, how the final product is really reflective of the place in which the grapes were grown. Well, we think that same thing applies in whiskey, and that, wheat and Triticale and these things that are grown in our backyard are different than they are in other parts of the country. And so that's what we try and do. Showcase what we have.
As a side note, if the inspiration was to make a better vodka than Grey Goose, I know we're not having a vodka, but did you guys eventually make like a wheated vodka that you like more than Grey Goose, or what happened with that?
Oh yeah, we have a tremendous vodka. Yeah, it's 100% soft white winter wheat. It gets incredible accolades and press, and it's absolutely delicious. It's got that rich, creamy character, hint of butterscotch and vanilla from that soft white winter wheat, and it is an amazing product. But I will tell you right now that selling craft vodka out in the world right now is a very difficult thing to do if you're above $20. I'll say that. There's
Fair
one small brand from Texas which seems to have sucked all the oxygen out of the room on vodka. So we also make a tremendous gin, and again, our gin is all about what was. We have a completely Northwest botanical deck. So being in Washington, which is known for apples, we have Fuji apple, we have mint, lavender, coriander, juniper, and then Yakima Valley hops in our gin. And of course, the vodka makes the base for our gin. So it's just a tremendous product. And at the time, it was groundbreaking because it was one of the new American styles. There was really focused more on botanical flavors and not so much on London dry style, juniper and things. So yeah, we do tremendous clear spirits as well across the country right now. All the interest seems to be in whiskey. It's just, there's right now there's an insatiable appetite for American whiskey out there, which is part of the reason we built the new facility, and part of the reason why we haven't been able to sit on whiskey longer.
So everything in this lineup is 3 years old. Why the 3-year-old mark?
Well, because 2-year-old whiskey sucks, to tell you the truth. I mean, to be honest with you, even we the 3-year-old, we take some pretty more dramatic cuts on the heads and tails on whiskey than probably most of our competitors do. Certainly more than the huge conglomerates do, and we rely on the barrel to color and flavor, not really filter and take out, impurities or off flavors. So we start out with a pretty good tasting distillate at the very beginning. And, wheat and Triticale both mature rather quickly. And so at 3 years, these whiskeys are really quite good for being a 3-year-old product. The versions that are 4 and 5 years old, which we were starting to get to before sales really took off, were really quite amazing. And we hope to never go less than 3. We really want to go more towards 5. But the reason we're at 3 is really just a supply and demand equation, really.
Yeah, we just did a tasting with a brand where they were saying that their goal is to hit the 5-year mark. It seems like that's kind of the sweet spot for brands in US that everybody seems to be striving for, is the 5-year mark.
Yeah, I think the 5-year mark is great. I mean, it's, the whiskey is really good at that point in time, and it'll get better for some years. At some point in time, the barrel will tend to take over a little too much on some things, and 5 years seems to be a really just kind of great balancing point. And I think you can still offer a 5-year whiskey at a price that's reasonable out there. Once you start sitting on liquid for 10, 11, 12 years, you got to make some money back on that when you sell it. And so I think there's a lot of value and good price value ratio when you hit about that 5-year mark. I think is a sweet spot for sure.
Did the state give you any break as far as your alcohol tax there, like they've given to the wine and beer industry in Washington? I'll take that as a no.
That's a no. And we've been well, as you know, or may have heard, Washington privatized in 2012. And since then, prices have gone up dramatically in the state. And we have, between the taxes and the fees which are built in there, which are just taxes by another name, we average $26.15 a gallon for excise taxes in Washington state, which is astronomical. It is far and away the #1 in the country. And believe it or not, we can't even get a break on our 5% and 6% canned cocktails. They're taxed as if they were vodka or whiskey. So a 4-pack of my canned cocktails is should be about a $12.99 purchase. By the time you add taxes and fees in Washington, it's $21 for 4 cans. And we've tried to fight it in the legislature for this will be the 4th session, and the beer industry opposes us. So they get all the craft brewers all whipped up into a frenzy. They all start calling their legislators, and pretty soon the bill dies. And I don't know if we're ever going to get a break on liquor taxes in this state. So
Yeah, I bought a bottle. I was up visiting my brother-in-law in Kennewick, and I bought a bottle. It was like $25, and I left there, it was like $30, and I'm like, no, it's $25.
yeah, until
I
you get
still haven't figured out the liter tax.
oh yeah, it's $3.77 a liter, so it's $2.83 on a 750. But the tax that kills you, especially if you like good liquor, is there's a 20.5% tax at the register. So if you have a $100 bottle of liquor and you go to the register, they're going to add, $20.50 in sales tax, and they're going to add $2.83 in liter tax just to add insult to injury, and it's going to be, $123 purchase when you walk out the door.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was in shock.
Yeah, I'm in shock still. It's been 10 years. I'm still in shock.
No wonder everybody in Seattle distills their own.
Yeah. You guys want to move on to the Triticale?
Yeah, let's do that. So if I remember correctly, and please do tell us more about Triticale. Triticale is a new hybrid grain that's like a mix between wheat and rye. Is that pretty much it?
Well, I wouldn't call it new. It was actually first hybrid in Scotland in the late 1800s. So it's been around for a while. And it mostly, we were the first guys to commercially make a whiskey out of it. Typically it's feed grain. That's what it's used for predominantly. And really what the Scottish were trying to do was they were trying to combine the hardiness and disease resistant qualities of rye with the yield potential of wheat. And so you get a grain that's more like wheat size wise, but it has a spicy character to it that you might otherwise associate with rye. So it really is kind of the combination of the two. Don worked with Washington State University, which is down in the Palouse. It's in Pullman, Washington, surrounded by wheat fields. They have a huge agriculture school there. And so we use a clone of Triticale that is the 99th clone of Triticale. And that's what Farmer Mitch grows for us on the Wissota farm down there. So, and again, it's brought to us just like wheat is. It's either in super sacks, or he'll bring a big truck up with a seed auger in it and fill bags at the distillery. But and our Triticale is 100% Triticale. That's all that goes in there. That's the mash bill. This one typically is, again, you get some of that kind of yeasty biscuit, red, and then like a white peppery spice on the backside of it. So
I know that rye is pretty notorious for being hard to work with, that it like gunks up and is gluey and just a nightmare. How is Triticale?
Triticale processes through pretty much exactly like wheat does. Really not an issue at all. The one that's difficult to work with in the distillery and why people don't use it as much anymore is oats. Oats used to be more predominant in distilling here in America, but people have gotten away from it. In fact, Whiskey Advocate just did an article. They contacted me because we do have a whiskey that uses oats, and they were running an article about grains that used to be used in distilling, or the smaller grains that are used in distilling, and they were doing an article about oats.
Yeah, everybody's talking about pastries, making me hungry.
It does have a nice spiciness, like there would be a rye, but that must be just in that grain.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is truly the best of both worlds. Some people that come to the distillery have a tough time wrapping their head around it because they always think that we've blended wheat and rye. And that's not the case at all. It is a grain in and of itself. So that's a dry fly kind of first and only. I think there's been some other people that have done Triticale, and some of them were people that dry fly had a distilling school. We still do, but we had a distilling school for years, and people would come here, and it was the greatest boondoggle that Don ever thought of. People would come here and they would pay like $5,000 to work in the distillery for a week and learn how to distill. And so we got free labor out of it and just had to teach some people how to distill. But a lot of those people went on to found their own distilleries. Like Smooth Ambler was John Little was one of the guys that graduated from the dry fly distilling class before he started Smooth Ambler. And you have Timo that has Spirit Works in California. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but there's been a whole bunch of people. I think we have probably 100 distilleries around the country where their distiller got his start by going through the dry fly distilling class. And some of those guys, if you ever see any other Triticale whiskey in the market, chances are probably 95% that they were one of the guys that came through dry fly at the distilling school, and that's where they got their first exposure to Triticale. Because I know Timo's made some down at Spirit Works, and Ryan Montgomery in Montana has done some, and Skip Rock has done some over in the other side of Washington. So it is a
That
really
makes
unique
sense.
brand. Jim Beam did some too, that they put out there as a part of an experimental series some years back that I recall.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that, because Lauren Pat, who now works for Redwood, used to work for
Timo?
yes.
Yeah.
And so she's now one of the head distillers at Redwood. She's the one that mentioned the Triticale.
Yeah, I know. I saw something about that. I can't remember where. It was some news article, but something about Redwood. Yeah, and she was talking about her background.
That's awesome. Yeah, she had lots of nice things to say.
Timo makes slow gin at Spirit Works, which they used to send us a bottle of everything they would make, just like, hey, what do you guys think? What's your feedback on this? And they sent slow gin. And I was like, slow gin? Man, I haven't had slow gin since the 80s. And the last time I had slow gin made me think I never wanted to have slow gin again. And I tasted it, and damn, it was good, but everything in small doses, I guess, right?
For sure, for sure. This Triticale, I'm glad we got to try it. It's very interesting. It kind of blows your mind.
It is, and it gets more interesting with age. That was one of the ones that we had at a 4-year statement, and it was starting to really just come into its own. We've had to pull back a little bit on that, and but we've just put a whole bunch of it down here the last year. So we'll get to the point where we have a lot of that to work with. I had done a single barrel of Triticale that was 8-year-old Triticale, clocked in about 142 proof, that I did for a customer in Wisconsin. And it was one of the best whiskeys I've ever tasted in my life. Absolutely fabulous. So there's good things to come in the future for Triticale. Just have to be patient.
As far as a grain, how does it compare to others in your portfolio? Like cost wise and just like everything kind of, because not a lot of people are using it. So why aren't they?
Yeah, no, Triticale's cost wise, it's about the same as wheat in terms of raw materials. So I just think it's kind of yet to take off. We're kind of out there on our own. We got a few other people that have made some here and there, but we're kind of braving the trail on that one. And hopefully some other people get on board down the road. But it really does make fabulous whiskey. As to why other people aren't using it, I can't really speak to that. But
yeah, they're really tapping into the whiskey is any grain that's distilled and aged in wood, right? So it's pretty great.
Oh, well, yeah, there's these guys down in Tennessee. I think they're in Tennessee. Corsair.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever been there? They'll make whiskey out of anything.
Yeah, they had the quinoa whiskey and I think the oatmeal whiskey and everything. Yeah.
I don't know if they're just trying to monopolize the Whole Food shelves or what, put some quinoa whiskey out there, but they've tried a lot of those things, and a lot of those things actually just got added by the TTB, revised their list of approved grains. But we will still have problem when we submit federal colas on Triticale. And someone will come back and say, well, that's not, a grain that's approved for whiskey production. And then we have to turn around and send them the Triticale cola that we've had for 15 years and say, you've approved this. And then we have several other, like, wine barrel finished trits and everything else, and send it to, the TTB, and they go, oh, okay, I guess you're right. It's okay. So then they approve it. The bureaucracy, it depends on who you get at the TTB, but yeah, it's interesting. So Triticale, it's not the easiest sell in the world, I'll tell you that.
But if anyone likes it, you can buy it in LA. Trust me.
Yes, that is one that Wine Warehouse carries down there. Yeah.
And the colors on it, it's like a lovely blue, I guess, Easter color type of deal, pastels. Really
I
nice.
don't know. Let's call it Tiffany blue, I guess.
Yeah,
is
there you go.
You guys want to move on to the next one?
Let's do it. Cask and Release, right?
Yeah, let's do that. That'll be fun.
So the Cask and
can't
Release
remember which
had
one I
a
sent
lot
you.
of sediment. The bottle I poured had a ton of sediment at the bottom. Nobody got that in their bottle, but I just thought it was funny. I'm guessing that's the beer.
It shouldn't really happen, but
Eh,
which one?
no big deal.
Which one did I send you? I can't remember. That's a series that we do.
It says straight wheat whiskey finished in a beer barrel. Front George?
Okay, that's the Fort George one. Okay,
Yeah, Fort George. Yep.
yeah, that was finished. So this cask and release program is something we've been doing for years, and there's obviously a lot of, like California, Washington has, and Oregon has a ton of craft breweries, and they're always calling up, looking for bourbon barrels or looking for whiskey barrels to barrel age beer in. And so, we started sending them to breweries, and then we would get some of them back from the breweries on the back end, and we would transfer whatever whiskey style was originally in that barrel, we would transfer back into that barrel. So if it was a wheat whiskey barrel and we sent it to, Fort George, for example, when they sent it back, we would put wheat whiskey back in it and let it finish in that barrel for about another year. So we would take 3-year-old whiskey and put it in the beer barrel. And so cask and release, it's kind of a little play on words, fly fishing is cast and release. And so this is kind of a play on words with the barrels. We throw them out there and then we bring them back and catch them again, kind of thing, and make another product in there. And what changes in that lineup is the brewery and the beer style. And so it's always the same UPC code and usually occupies one shelf at retail or one, kind of tag at retail, I guess. But it's kind of like a seasonal beer is to a brewery. Like every time that cask and release comes out, there's going to be sort of a different iteration of it. And we kind of started putting some of the details of the beer that was in the barrel on the back of the bottle too. So if you see that particular bottle, it'll tell you Fort George, they're known for stouts. So they had a stout that was, I think, about a 14% beer that they aged in the barrel, and then they sent it back, and then we refilled it with wheat whiskey. So that one's an interesting one. It was just bottled. It has, if you've ever home brewed and made a stout beer or anything, if you've ever smelled black patent malt or chocolate malt, you get a little hint of that on the nose, and it kind of brings the stout into play, notes from a stout into play on the whiskey. We've done them with other breweries that do Scotch style ales in them, which those have been really, really good, unique, something that had a smoked malt in it. Those tend to play really well when refilled with whiskey. We've had people do porter. Usually it's a darker style, like something that's a big malty beer.
Speaking of fishing jokes, I'm surprised you don't have actual fishing gear made out of like staves and barrels and what, like combining fishing with whiskey on your website, because you have a really cool merch page for anyone that's interested. You have a lot of really cool stuff on there, but you don't have like fishing lures or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. We haven't done that, but that's not a bad idea. I'll bring that up at the next promo meeting.
Who's the big fisherman in the group?
That's really Don. He loves to fly fish, and he gets out there. And we're involved in some charities too. One of them's called Casting for a Cure, which is raising money for cancer research. But it's just a big boondoggle. It's like all these guys from Nike and Don and all these guys go down to outside of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and fish for a week and raise money for cancer causes. I am a passable fly fisherman, I guess. I would love to do more of it. I just don't have the time to get out there, which is a shame because we live in a part of the world where there's just all these incredible streams. And I have friends that they live for it, man. They go out like every weekend, every chance they get, they've got a fly rod in their hand. That's sort of their solace, standing in that river and the mountains and, just the sound of the stream coming through. And fly fishing is sort of their church, I guess. It's where they go and kind of recharge their batteries. So maybe one of these days we'll get big enough we can hire a bunch of people to do other stuff and we can go fishing instead.
I was gonna say, when you're big enough, you guys are gonna start flying influencers in to go fly fishing and visit the distillery.
Yeah. Well, that'd be nice.
So I didn't realize fly fishing is catch and release. You don't eat the fish you catch.
It depends on where you're fishing and what you want to do. There's places where you can keep the fish for sure, but most people, are there primarily for the sport of it, and so they use barbless hooks and they release the fish and hopefully catch them again when they're bigger. So
I never understood catch and release, but that's neither here nor there. I'm in it for fishing for the fish to eat. I'm not there for the. It's like drinking whiskey and spitting,
yeah, I like it. I just, like I said, I just don't have enough time. Doesn't seem like to get out there and do more of it. But
The logo on the label design on this one is totally different from the other ones. It's the one that really stands out.
So you'll see that paper label on Cask and Release, and you'll see it also on specialty barrel projects. And the reason we did that is, a couple of reasons, really. Our glass manufacturer hates doing small runs of bottles. So, and they're very slow to turn them around, and I got to pay for screen changes on the printer and everything. So if I go to them and I say, I'm doing, a barrel for D&M in San Francisco, and I need 32 cases of glass, and here it's a custom label, it's like that turnaround time might end up being 4 months before I actually get that barrel back to D&M. And so we've moved all of the label creation on those projects here locally. And that label actually just won a big design award here locally. Our design firm is very proud of that one. And it also helps kind of delineate our core products from our specialty barrel projects. So it used to be, if you went to Total Wine and More, you would see, everything was spaced up on the shelf. And there was just a little band on the side of the private barrel that would say, this specially selected by Total Wine and More, 6-year-old, number 4 char, whatever it was. But if you just looked at the bottles, it looked like just our core offerings. And so now this label also helps us just kind of delineate that this is one of the special offerings. We have a couple of those in California right now. D&M bought it might be an 8-year-old wheat whiskey that's at D&M right now. It's about 140 proof, somewhere in that ballpark. Amazing whiskey. And then K&L bought a single barrel of one of our Irish styles too down there in California. Again, pretty amazing. I think it was a 9-year-old Hibernian, which is 30% barley, 30% malted barley, 20% wheat, and 20% oats. But there's some kind of cool things that we've done under that label that you may see in the market down there.
Wow,
What do you
it's
think?
only $60. That's crazy.
Which one at K&L or?
K&L, yeah. We
Yeah.
love K&L out here, so
Yeah.
that's insane for a 9-year-old at cask strength.
It's insane how much I talked to the buyer there. I had lunch with him. He said he just got back from Scotland. He chooses single barrels. I said, how many single barrels do you buy a year at K&L? He says, about 350. I'm like, are you joking? Like 350 barrels is a huge amount of whiskey to buy at premium prices and sell. But apparently they are a big deal in California, and they don't even ship out of state. It's just all done right there in Cali, and they move through some product.
We have friends that buy a car worth every year from K&L.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What kind of stout was this done with? Do you know?
Well, it was I'm not sure what their mash bill was or malt bill was on the beer there. It ended up being a big, thick stout that I think clocked in about 14.9% ABV.
Yep.
And then after it came out of the barrels, then they actually rested it on hazelnuts for another like 2 months before they released it. And then they bottled it all in little 500 ml wax dipped bottles, but pretty tremendous beer. They sent us a case of it, which was really nice to do.
I want some. No, I just wondered because this has got a lot of chocolate on the front and a lot of coffee on the back. So just kind of curious.
Yeah, that'd definitely be Fort George's style. They're known for stout. They do a festival here called the Dark Arts Festival, which is like the best way to describe it is Cirque du Soleil meets Burning Man. And they own the whole city block in Astoria, Oregon. So there's fire eaters and sword eaters and just the whole carnival experience there, and like 140 stouts on tap. And pretty crazy. They do about half of those are their own creation, and then the other half are other brewers in the region that show up for the festival. But yeah, so I definitely wanted to do something with them centered on stouts for sure.
Sounds like an admirable plan.
Yeah. You want to move on to the next one?
Sounds good. What's next for us? So, before we do that, this one I noticed on the side says non-chill filtered. Are all of your 45ers non-chill filtered or just the special releases?
Just the special releases. We used to non-chill filter everything, but the consuming public at large doesn't understand flocculation. And so what happens is if you non-chill filter 90 proof whiskey, and this happens in the winter time in particular, and you ship it to Wisconsin or you ship it to Michigan or even Nevada or wherever, you start getting phone calls because people think that you haven't adequately filtered the whiskey or there's some impurity or something in there. Because what happened is it got cold in transit, and the fatty acids, proteins, and flavor esters coagulate and precipitate out of the liquid. And really all that you have to do is let the liquid return to room temperature and give it a little shake, and those things will reabsorb. But we got so many calls, and distributors didn't understand it. We're picking up product from retail, and so we decided that we would chill filter the 90 proof versions. We don't chill filter bourbon because it's 101 and it shouldn't flocculate. And of course, we don't do cask strength. And then we don't chill filter any of the specialty barrel releases or the cask release. But the two main products for us really, or three, I guess, that sit on most grocery shelves would be wheat whiskey, Triticale, and bourbon. And the two 90 proofs, you know, if they look like a snow globe, nobody's going to buy them. And so it just made more sense to do it that way.
It totally makes sense. It's funny because the more we get into it, as time goes on, and I know for me for sure, you know, with time you get wisdom, and I start to realize just how 1% of the 1% the people in this room are. Like, you know, the bottles that excite me are bottles that if I bring to someone like a general consumer, they're like, why are you bringing me 144.1% cask strength whiskey with like what? I can't drink this fire, you know? Like normal people drink 40, 43, 45% whiskey and they don't want to see talking. Like we want to see the oils. We don't touch it. Don't do anything to it.
Yeah,
we're
and we thought we would clarify everything by putting a statement on the back of the bottle that said on everything that was non-chill filtered, we added a statement that said non-chill filtered to preserve all that whiskey goodness or something kind of hokey that was on the back of the bottle, right? And then unfortunately, somewhere along the way, the TTB decided to audit our labels. And so some guy out there compared our labels to the federal COLAs, which are your label approvals that you get. And you're not supposed to add any verbiage to the label that's not on your federal COLA. And that statement about non-chill filtering was on there. And so they gave us an option. You can either redo the labels or you can file all new COLAs, and which means you have to file new label registrations in all 50 states. And so we just decided it was easier to take the verbiage off the bottle. So, but we were trying to identify which of the products were non-chill filtered and which were on the label. So,
all right. For
so
all the, are we on the bourbon now?
usually we go port finish and then to
Oh
bourbon.
yeah, port finish. Let's do the port. Sounds good. Oh, another pretty color. This one's violet.
Yeah, and that really made sense for that product. I mean, the very first iteration of port finished wheat whiskey was actually done in a local winery here. A friend of mine, Don Townsend, made huckleberry port. And I don't know if you guys know what huckleberries are or familiar with them. Like it's a big thing here in the Northwest. It's a wild mountain grown blueberry that you can't cultivate. You can't grow it. It grows out in the mountains. And so to get them, you got to either go out in the mountains and pick them or find somebody else that does and then charges you, $75 a gallon for them. And he had made a huckleberry port. And so that was the first barrel that we used to make port finish. And so that purple label just seemed to make sense. And the product was amazing. We try and use all local port barrels on that, which is very difficult. You would think in a wine growing region like Washington, there'd be a few more people that make port, but there's only a handful of guys that produce it in the state, and it's a very small niche of the market. And so they don't empty barrels very often. So port barrels are like gold when we can find them. And we found them from Kestrel, from Townsend, from a company called Witt Cellars in Prosser. I got a bunch of port barrels from them last year, which is great. I trade the guys liquor and canned cocktails for barrels. It's a great deal. And so we have, it's a small production item and we have trouble keeping port barrels in the flow, but so far so good. This one gets some nice accolades. I think it's kind of a sleeper in our portfolio. It definitely has kind of that a little bit of a fruity, sweet edge to it. It's definitely different than anything else in our portfolio. We got twin 94s from Tasting Panel Magazine and Wine Enthusiast. I don't know, about maybe 2 years ago now. And everybody just loves that whiskey. It makes great old fashions, black Manhattans. We make a bunch of different cocktails with it at the distillery, but definitely a very popular product for us.
What's the fruit that they make that Whidbey Island liqueur from? You recall?
Well, Whitby Port, you mean?
I don't know if it was a port or just I don't
So-
think it was huckleberries.
Yeah, no, Whitby Port is probably the largest selling port in the state of Washington, and it's part of San Michelle Wine Estates, which is by far the largest producer of wine in the state. And that's probably the #1 selling Washington port in the country, actually. But it is a port wine.
Okay.
I don't know what brandy they use in it. That would be interesting to know, I guess, but because all port wine, basically, you can make port from just about any red grapes. It doesn't have to be traditional port grapes. And what you do is when the fermentation is going and it gets to a final bricks or residual sugar that you want in the wine, basically you dose it with brandy. And what happens is when you dose it with brandy, it kills all the yeast and it stops the fermentation in its tracks at whatever that sugar level is. And so that's why you get the combination of high alcohol and high sugar in that product, because the brandy brings in more alcohol. Same time, it stops the fermentation and preserves the rest of the sugars that are in there.
Okay, thank you.
What's interesting to me is that every country has control over, like port is supposed to be from Portugal, but it seems like that's the only one that's not respected and protected, because like everyone in America makes port. It's so, because like you can't make sherry in America, you can't make Madeira in America, but you can make port in America.
Well, you can make those other things. You just have to be really careful about how you label it. Like Champagne's been very aggressive about, over the years protecting their, Champagne as a distinct product of France. But all those things get bastardized to a degree. Gallo used to be the worst at taking, they used to label Andre Champagne back in the day, and it was far from it.
I actually read somewhere that there are 2 brands in California that have retained the legal right to name their sparkling wine champagne, because they just ignored the law that passed during World War II, and France never did anything, like, because it was World War II. France didn't stop them in time, and so they just grandfathered themselves in.
Yeah, that's interesting. Who are they? Do you know?
It's not good ones. It's like Cooks and something else. It's
Yeah,
it's nothing like modern, not like a classy champagne. It's just like sparkling wine that just, it's weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, like sherry has to come from Shiraz, has to come from Spain.
Yeah.
So
I'd like to get more sherry barrels. Sherry barrels and port barrels from Portugal are very expensive. On the resale market, they're like $500 to $800 to buy a used sherry barrel or port barrel. And there are people that produce some sherry domestically, or sherry style domestically, but it's not enough barrels to really get any. So you pretty much have to buy them from a barrel broker dealing in used barrels out of Spain, and they're super expensive. But man, wheat whiskey really loves a sherry barrel, so I wish I could get a few more of those.
how many times do you use the port casks?
Just one.
Just one. So what do you do with your, I mean, usually wine casks can be used multiple times just because they have so much flavor still in them, as opposed to like bourbon, usually gets used once.
Yeah, after we turn them out, I mean, in some instances they'll go to a brewery and find their way into the Cask and Release lineup. Although I don't know that we've shipped any to breweries recently. So more often than not, when we're done with them, like we do a bunch of Cabernet and Syrah and Cab Franc and Red Blend and Petit Verdot and Pete Syrah and whatever red wine barrels I can get my hands on. Once we use them, then generally they'll be sold to the public. People will make planters out of them. My brother-in-law takes some of them, make furniture out of them. And, occasionally they'll go to breweries. but breweries haven't really wanted the wine ones so much as they just, usually they want bourbon, whiskey, or trit.
Makes sense.
I think
And-
it'd be interesting to do if a brewery wanted to do a sour in a
Mm,
wine barrel, a wine barrel that had been used to finish whiskey. That would be probably an interesting product, I would think.
for sure. Yeah, a nice sour. And so it's a port finish, right? So you're saying gets 3 years in a virgin oak cask and then another year in the port. So it's the oldest one we're trying today.
Yep.
So it's a 4-year-old. Okay.
Well, that and the cask and release are both. We don't always finish them for a year, so that's why it doesn't have a 4-year statement on it. But yeah, the cask and release and the port finish very similar. 3 years in primary barrel, and then 3-year-old whiskey is transferred either to the beer barrel that came back to us for cask and release, or transferred to the port barrel.
So when are you doing a Triticale port cask?
Oh, we do. We release that once a year, actually in December. And we usually do, it's usually a 6, 7, or 8-year-old port finish Triticale. So, and usually they've had 2 or 3 years in the port barrel. And so it's a fun product. It's delicious. Yeah. And we sell it at the distillery only, so it doesn't make its way into distribution. So it's released here once a year. It's kind of it's almost a tradition in Spokane. So
Too bad it's probably 30% more than it should be.
yeah, it's gonna. We're also doing a 10-year-old single malt release this year. That's gonna happen in September. That'll be fun too.
Did you say single malt? I know Jordan perked up. He loves the malt.
Yeah, we do single malt too. We don't make it. We don't put any in our regular lineup, but I actually have a pretty decent inventory of older single malts. And starting with the single malts, this 10-year-old, I think, was aged in a used Jack Daniel's barrel. I think the anything younger than that, the stuff that's 9 and less now, was aged in used dry fly bourbon barrels. So we've been using our own bourbon barrels to age single malt. So, and the single malts, I love it. It's absolutely just elegant and delicious, and they're not peated at all. They're just more of that kind of ripe fruit and honey. So they're fun products. We do some of those in single barrels too, but yeah, those will be the 2 big releases we'll do between now and the end of the year. It'll be 10-year-old single malt, and then I think it's a 6-year-old port finish Triticale, which is
Put me on the list. I need at least a bottle of that to compare to the other American single malts we've been talking about.
they've been talking about opening up direct to consumer shipping in California. Have you guys followed that bill at all? I mean, the wholesalers got a hold of it and just bastardized the hell out of it. But they're trying to get to the point where distillers could sell direct to consumers in California. And then the wholesalers got involved and like, oh, okay, well, you can do that if you don't have a wholesale agreement in California. You can do that. They added all these other provisions to it that just basically going to torpedo the bill. But
Ship to Florida.
yeah, Florida's not one of the states where it's legal yet. I don't think direct to consumer.
I won't say nothing.
I definitely would love to be in Florida. We're going to keep working on that one. It's too big a state for us not to be in.
I've got a friend with Republic National. And
Yeah, we used to be with them. They dropped us down there.
too small.
Yeah, we're just too small for them to fiddle with. So
I can put a word in at Lewis Bear. Maybe they'll do something.
definitely, I mean, I'm open for anything right now.
Jason, do they have dry fly where you're at?
Only, ironically, I looked in the price book. The 2 that are in the price book are the bourbon and the Huckleberry vodka and nothing else.
Yeah, they just discontinued Huckleberry vodka. And we had everything in there last year. We got delisted. So we've been almost a year. In Michigan, you have to be out for a year before you can apply to relist. And it was probably a serious screw up on our part because we went into Michigan in the middle of COVID. And so we launched, let's see, it would have been, well, I think it was 2020, the fall of 2020, and we got everything listed. And it was just a bad time. So we ended up losing a whole bunch of distribution. We have what I think is a quality distributor there in Imperial Beverage. And so I've been kind of waiting and watching the clock to see when I can come back in and re-intro. I'll be there October 3rd for a big trade show in Detroit and tasting whiskey and stuff. So we'll try and get things going again there. But again, we just kind of launched that market, bad timing. We do a lot of canned cocktails there, actually. That's still good business for us in Michigan. So
Tell us about your canned cocktails. You keep teasing us, and I'm starting to fall for the canned cocktail trend. Tell us about those.
delicious. Oh, they're delicious. Absolutely. I mean, we just sought to basically take what we were doing in the tasting room and put them into a can that you could take on the go or on the fly. So we call them dry fly on the fly craft cocktails. And they're 100% all natural, no artificial flavors, preservatives, colors, nothing, just fresh juices and cocktail syrups and our dry fly spirits, man. They are the best in the market. I've tasted so many other things out there and everybody else is using artificial sweeteners, preservatives, and all these things that they just taste like shit, most of them. And so ours are just absolutely like crushing a fresh cocktail at a high-end cocktail bar. So yeah, they're a lot of fun. We just made a whiskey smash, our first whiskey cocktail. So it's Washington wheat whiskey, lemon juice, strawberry, and mint. And it is absolutely just delicious. And if you pour it in a glass and you smell, it's like, oh my gosh, just like strawberries and mint, a little hint of oak in there from the wheat whiskey. They're good. Definitely passionate about those right now.
And those are available everywhere?
We're in probably 30 states with those, so doing pretty good. We only have 3 of them listed with our California distributor, which is Wine Warehouse. I don't know. They don't seem to grasp the canned cocktail. They're more of a they're artisan spirits and a lot of wine and a lot of great craft beer, but they haven't embraced the canned cocktail yet. I'll say that. They carry our Huckleberry lemonade, our spicy lemonade, which is made with habanero and jalapeno infused vodka blended with house-made lemonade, and then our Moscow Mule, which is made with local ginger beer syrup that Dylan makes for us. But California, I got some work to do down there.
All 3 of those are vodka based, right?
Yeah, those 3 are vodka based.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool.
So when,
All right,
when you talk to Brandon Bartlett, you tell him that he needs to bring some more stuff in.
I'll let him know for sure.
Tell him Cutwater sold 114,000 cases in California in August alone or July alone. There's a market there.
For sure. Are we on the 101 bourbon?
Yeah, I think that's the next up.
All right, let's bring it. Let's bring the corn. An interesting proof. I think I've heard of 101 somewhere.
Yeah, there's a few people that make it, the traditional distiller's cut.
The nice orange one, the straight bourbon 101.
Yeah, it was funny, like a few years ago, my partner Don, this was when everybody was going nuts on bottled and bond stuff. And bottled and bond, 4 years, basic. basically one distilling season, all housed and aged at the same distillery, all that. So we're all of that already. Like that's not anything unusual for us. But it was getting to be like, from a marketing standpoint, there was a lot of interest in bottled and bond. And so Don was like, I think we should just change bourbon to, 100 proof and call it bottled and bond bourbon. I'm like, no, I don't think we should. And I kept thinking back, you ever seen the movie Spinal Tap? And I keep thinking back to like, our amplifiers go to 11,
It's way
right?
louder.
It's one louder. So why would I go backwards one proof just so I can call it bottled and bond? So I don't know. We've stuck with the 101, and that whiskey usually drinks like a lot softer than 101. Most people that taste it think when they taste it, they're like, that there's no way that's 101 proof, because it is pretty easy to drink. That is 55% corn, 45% Triticale is what we use in the mash bill on Bourbon 101.
Any wheat or just the triticale and corn?
Our standard mash bill is just the 55% corn, 45% Triticale.
Sorry, I misheard and heard 55 and 35. And I was like, where's the other 10? I apologize.
Yeah. Sorry, 55 and 45. I actually don't have all of the same whiskeys you're drinking there. I just have a bottle of 6-year-old cask strength here. So if the meeting starts to get a little weird from here on, it's because I've been drinking the 126 proof wheat whiskey.
Somebody's got.
Yeah,
We appreciate
absolutely.
your sacrifice.
Yeah, somebody's got to, keep up appearances, so to speak.
Well, one of the most legendary tastings we did, the brand at some point started taking swigs from the bottle, and that tasting ended up lasting like 6 hours, like into the wee hours of the night. 7 hours. I had left, and I heard stories that they like passed out on camera. I heard it was a fun tasting.
Are you naming names, or is that top
Nope.
secret?
Nope. Definitely not while we're being recorded. For sure. What does everybody think of this bourbon?
This is great. It's almost candy corn right off the top, and it slides into the cinnamon towards the back end. It's lovely. The color is fantastic.
Well, thank you. We like to we always like to say our bourbon is corny enough it might tell you a dad joke if you sit around long enough. We get the corn from the Hutterian Brotherhood, which is the Hutterians are like kind of like Mennonites or the Amish in a way. So when I first came to Dry Fly, I didn't know who the Hutterians were, and I'm like, well, who are these guys? And I have this vision like, these are guys that they must biodynamically farm and harvest in the third phase of the moon or whatever the hell kind of thing was going on. And Don's like, no, they're pretty much like the Amish, but with cell phones and tractors. And they farm like 5,000 acres about 20 miles west of Spokane. And they come in and they have, Dan brings us our corn and always likes to sit down for a chat. And I have a hard time understanding him because he has this upper Midwest accent that, like, have you ever seen the movie Fargo? So like Dan's accent is like Fargo to the second power. Like I can barely understand sometimes what he's talking about, but they grow corn for us, but they also run like 5,000 head of cattle, and they grow all kinds of stuff out there. It's pretty crazy. They're a commune, and basically when the commune grows, then they'll go and they'll buy another plot of land and start a new commune, and they buy like 5,000 acres at a time. So they're not kind of cutesy organic or biodynamic farmers by any stretch, but they do grow some fantastic corn out there.
What color is the corn?
It's yellow.
Okay.
It's not red corn or anything like that. I had somebody send me some pictures of some corn that looked like a kaleidoscope, or it was all these different colors, purple and these. I don't know what strains they were, but I was like, well, that would be interesting to make bourbon out of, at least from a storytelling perspective. And there was some form of heirloom corn that I don't know what it was. It was an interesting looking ear of corn. I thought, oh, I could make whiskey out of that.
I like the Balcones blue corn.
Yeah, I haven't tried that one. I don't see a lot of them up here in Washington. I know they're a pretty big brand in a lot of places, but I haven't tried a lot of their stuff. Is it 100% corn?
Yeah,
Have you
yeah,
guys had them?
they've got a couple of the one that's blue corn, that's 100% blue corn. They have a bourbon that's one of that, and then they've got another one that's kind of their well version. That's a 4 grain.
I'd be interested to try them.
Tastes kind of like a skit, like if you made popcorn on a skillet.
I don't know if I'd like that.
It's interesting, like it really is. But yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of people. I think the corn you might have been talking about may have been there's one I think called Glass Gem, and it's about 10 different colors on it. And it's fun because some of the craft places now are going nuts with their corn, like Woodhat in Missouri. He just keeps growing new strains of corn just to experiment. So he'll do a batch. He'll grow. He goes out in his backyard, does a crop, then harvests it and distills it, and then grows a different one just to see what it does.
That's fun. I mean, I like that kind of stuff. I mean, that's really where innovation ultimately comes from, because one of these times he'll hit on something that'll be like, damn, that's good, that nobody else has tried, just because he's, just continually rolling and trying new things.
I think Jason and I will talk about getting you some samples of that blue corn so you could try it.
Yeah, I usually, if I want to try something else from a competitor, like there's Total Wine stores here. They tend to be the best place to try and find, broad selection of things. They usually have it, but
I mean, you may have just stumbled into a group of people that has hundreds and hundreds of 1 ounce sample bottles laying around and loves sharing whiskey. So you don't have to buy a full size bottle. We may have done 150 or 160 tastings over the last 2 years. Yeah, so you're in good company.
I think I should become some sort of an influencer out there, because we send bottles to influencers, and there's these people, ADHD whiskey, or bourbon junkies, or there's all these people that bourbon consensus, whiskey consensus, all these people we send samples to. And I've seen some of the collections, and these guys have thousands and thousands of bottles of whiskey that people have just sent to them, just for their, to do some cool photography and, say a few nice words. And I thought, man, that's a racket. I should get involved in that.
Yep, everybody wants to be an influencer.
I'm just going to be an influencer on like 12-year-old single malt scotch. I'm going to specialize. So just send me all the 12-year-old single malt scotch you can find.
You're really setting the bar really low. 12-year-old single malt scotch, really? You got to go higher than that. That's the base for scotch.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think. I'm going to want a few bottles. So I don't want to go too much into the ether. Otherwise it gets,
If you join the virtual tasting society, we've tried everything from what's the young, I don't know, 5-year-old scotch to a 35-year-old scotch. We did a 39-year-old single malt scotch at one tasting. I don't know if we've gotten older than that, but we've tried the gamut. We've tried a lot, and most of the people in this room.
39-year-old scotch.
Mm-hmm.
How was it?
Amazing.
Was it, who was the distillery?
I'll let some other people chime in.
We need to do it again.
Was it super peaty or was it a?
No.
No, I think we're talking about the Kingsman,
Oh, no, that wasn't on a tasting though. I know on a tasting
not
we
on a
did.
tasting.
I think, so the 39-year-old, I think was the Anok. And I don't think it was officially part of a tasting, but we had raffled off a few samples of that. But I know when we did Old Pulteney, we included a 35-year-old release as part of that, and everybody got to taste it. It was one of those where I was like, do you guys want me to make it an optional add-on or just include it? And I was like, include it. I'm not doing it without it. I was like, all right, cool. It ended up being $100 tasting, but you know, how often can you say you tried a 35-year-old single malt scotch, you know?
Yeah, no, I can honestly say I have never tried one. That's pretty cool.
A lot of people in the room were like, this scotch is older than me. This is cool. All right. Jane was the first one to say that.
I'm sure I have it in my notes somewhere.
Yeah. That said, well, great. Elijah just left. Trying to get Elijah and Rory back into the photo. All right, well, let me drag my feet a little because he was just here. Yeah, we've done quite a few amazing tastings, and this is one of them. This is really cool. We get and try some really interesting stuff. I like wheat whiskey.
What I'll say, I remember, 'cause I looked at the website. So I was saying before we started tasting, I was in Spokane like November, and I was staying around the corner from you guys, stumbled upon it, did a night, and I ordered the smoked trout dip. 'Cause
Yeah,
I love it. But I remember I had like 6 or 7 grams, and I was like halfway through, I was like, am I destroying my palate with the smoked trout dip? Like, am I just like shoot myself in the mouth? Like, and I was like, man, I don't care. It's really good. And so I remember some of the night, I really enjoyed the whiskey. I really enjoyed the dip, and it was a nice little precursor to a little dinner. So it was definitely a good night.
yeah, the restaurant business is new to us, so it's been an evolution, and so having the history with fly fishing, of course, that smoked trout dip came into play. We tried to do some things with incorporating the spirits in the production, like the gin steamed clams are amazing, where we use dry fly gin, and we do use the bourbon in our barbecue sauce with the pulled pork and things like that. So it's been fun, but I've never been in the restaurant business. It's interesting to a degree, but just never know what you're going to get. Some days you walk through the restaurant and there's nobody in there. Like you shoot a cannon through the place, and then for some inexplicable reason, the next day it's wall-to-wall people. It's like how do you even plan how much staff to have on hand for that? We're still trying to get our hands around it. So it's new to us, but it was designed to complement the spirits and incorporate the spirits as much as possible in the food preparations. We actually have boozy cupcakes now that a local bakery makes, and they come and they get Triticale whiskey, they get gin, and they get some canned cocktails, and they bake these into their cupcakes, and then we offer them as dessert in the distillery. So it's been kind of fun.
That's awesome. That's really great. All right, I dragged my feet long enough. Elijah's back. Everyone raise a glass and smile at your camera. I'm glad to see Rory in his awesome shirt. Awesome. Everyone, thank you so much, Terry. We really enjoyed this. Thank you for joining us and telling us all about dry fly and sharing these amazing expressions with us. So cheers to you.
Cheers.
Love it. Everyone got it. Oh, fantastic. It's a great shot. And as we move on to our final, I don't know, are people most excited? Well, I'm just curious, I guess by show of hands, which expression were people most excited to try today? Was it the Triticale as I was, or is it like the cask strength wheat? Triticale?
Triticale.
Yeah, all right, yeah. For me, it was the first time trying Triticale, so I
Me
was
too.
super stoked for that.
You
Awesome.
should have asked me. I've had a bottle for like 6 months.
If I try every one of the bottles that you have, I would die. This guy, like every day he's posting, oh, look, mail time. I had 4 more bottles show up, and then he opens every single one of them.
What, dude? I bought the K&L bottle from tonight.
Love it.
I bought because I had that. There's 2 expressions. One's a malt, right, and one's a Irish, and they're all from the same farmer, or like it's like a 5th generation farmer, right there at it. And I had both expressions. They're really good. So I can only imagine a 9-year cask strength. There's like $60. I don't know how you don't buy that.
Yeah, no, it's phenomenal stuff. It's I'm supposed to get him a bunch of info so that he can put all of our stuff on his website. So I have to follow up with David on that at K&L. So hopefully pretty soon you'll be able to buy all our stuff on their website. But yeah, those Irish styles are really, really interesting. So quick side story, they're called O'Danahers, Hibernian, and O'Danahers Caledonian. And Tim Danaher was a farm that supplied dry fly with grains. And so he'd come up from Colfax and bring his grains when the guys needed them. And he just got infatuated with the whole idea of distilling. And so he decided that he should go to Ireland and research Irish whiskey recipes, which I think is mostly just an excuse to go to Ireland and drink around the country. But he came back and told my partner Don that he wanted to start a distillery in this little town called Colfax, Washington, which is a little more than a wide spot in the road. Maybe 1,000 people live there. And Don told him, "You're out of your mind. You don't want to open a distillery in Colfax. You're going to spend, easy $300,000 plus to open a distillery, and you only want to make 1 or 2 products. Why don't you just come here and make your products here at the distillery?" So that's what Tim does. He brings his grains up, and basically we'll turn the distillery over to Tim, and he'll make either Hibernian or Caledonian whiskey, depending on his schedule, and then puts it away. And then we sell it under our federal colas and through our distribution network. And you'll see those products out there. Sometimes they'll say, like this specialty barrel will say dry fly, and then it'll say O'Danahers Hibernian, I think, in smaller text on it. But we also have the 2 that are just the O'Danahers Hibernian and Caledonian. And Caledonian's more Scottish style. It's 100% barley. It's 50% malted barley and 50% raw barley. And then the other one is, as I alluded to earlier, it's 30% barley, 30 malted barley, 20 wheat, and 20 oats. And those are all minimum 5-year products. And so when you find the regular O'Danahers, they're all 5 years old. And then this one is a particularly special one that K&L has.
I have some in a cart.
Yeah, my VP of ops is pissed off at me because I sold so many old whiskey barrels here in the last year that the inventory is looking a little bit kind of ravaged. Like we sold a whole bunch of like between 8 and 10-year-old wheat whiskey barrels to different places around the country, and truly amazing products. But it kind of tapped us out on older wheat whiskey, unfortunately. And we're already tapped out on older bourbon and older trit. So right now we're focusing on kind of rebuilding stocks, I guess.
What was the other California retailer that you said had a barrel that they bought?
A tiny wine shop in San Francisco called D&M.
D&M?
Yeah.
I'm just going to see if they have a website.
S&M.
Oh, that's why I got these weird listings. Thank you.
She is the lady that owns that place, man. She is a firecracker, but she's got a great palate, and she made a spectacular choice amongst the samples we sent her. I tried, handicap it going into it if I got a set of samples and figure out, because I'll always have my favorite of the bunch, and she nailed it. I think she bought 8-year-old wheat whiskey, and it is absolutely spectacular stuff.
If I'm looking at the right place, dnm.com. They don't have it. They must be sold out.
Yeah. Or she hasn't taken delivery yet. It was only shipped down to Wine Warehouse about a month ago.
Oh, okay, yeah, maybe it's just either not on their website or hasn't taken delivery yet. Okay, fine, we'll stalk her. I mean, we'll keep an eye on it.
I honestly don't even know if she has a website. It's D ampersand sign and M, right?
Yeah, we found it.
Yeah.
Oh, we're quick over here.
Yeah, no, she's right in the city there. So
Yeah, Jordan here has a reputation where if it's drizzlyable, he's been known to order a bottle and have it before the tasting ends. He
Why
he
not?
once made a brand owner nearly cry on camera. It's pretty great.
Here's her joy. Let's not act like I bullied her. She was very excited.
This is terrible. I'm gonna buy all the stock of it. No, like
Just dumped it
she was-
out.
yeah, but I if you guys I would encourage you to if you want to try an older wheat whiskey, that bottle of D&M is phenomenal. The 10 and 11-year-old barrels that I sold, one went to Oklahoma and the other went to I can't remember. I think it's Tennessee. Tennessee buys more single barrel whiskey than any other state. It's crazy over there. Of course, the market in Tennessee, all of the liquor goes through a handful of independently owned liquor stores. So the grocers aren't in it. So none of the grocery guys, no Costco, no Safeway, Kroger, nobody has liquor. It's all these independent stores that are all like, 5 to 10,000 square feet. And they just have you go in there and they'll have 4 or 5 barrel picks stacked in the lobby, every one of those stores that you go into. It's just like a big thing for them. So they're the ones that kind of clean me out on older wheat whiskey. But yeah, if you're in California, that D&M bottle is amazing.
Sounds
What do you
good.
think
All
of
right.
Cask Strength wheat?
Is everybody drinking the cask strength? Has everybody already started drinking it? All right, good. I feel like I'm slow today. I'm the only one not drinking. I'm gonna launch this poll real quick, and you all drink and share your thoughts on the cask strength wheat. Hey, Kate's not here to yell at me and tell me I'm doing the polls wrong.
I'm not often a cask strength fan because normally all I get is alcohol off something
Yeah.
this high of a proof. But this has got such a lovely buttery flavor right off the top. I mean, I could actually drink this without adding water and ice to it. It might take me an hour and a half, but I could drink it. But this is really lovely. I mean, I can't believe it's actually 120.
I know.
This was a tough choice.
That cask strength wheat drinks so soft. It's deceptive. If you put it in an old fashioned and have a couple of them, you better watch out because it'll sneak up on you. It's too easy to drink for its proof. It is, and that's just wheat. Wheat gets soft and it gets rich and it has great flavors even at high proofs.
I will say I have one complaint. It looks way too similar to the wheat. Like it's almost like impossible to tell them apart. They're both yellowish. And literally you have to just find the really small print that says cask strength and look at the proof. You guys need to make them different. Sure.
Yeah. No, you're not the first person to say that. And actually the merchandisers that work for distributors out there, that are throwing 1,000 things on the shelf when they're in a grocery store or whatever, they often will put cask strength in the regular wheat whiskey slot. And then I get complaints because customers go up to the register and they want the $39.95 wheat whiskey. And I think cask strength rings up at $10 more. I think it's $49.95, which is still a hell of a value for what it is, quite honestly. So yeah, you're right. We probably do need to make some sort of delineation there. What I really want to do is I want to do a cask strength bourbon too. and have
So
that as
120 is a pretty
regular offer.
exact number for cask strength. Is that you just pick casks that come down to 120, or how does that work?
Oh, no, we proof it down to 120. So that's our original barreling strength. And so
Mhm.
when we put the White Dog in the barrel, it's 120. And then we're in a super dry climate. So in dry climates like Eastern Washington, you lose a lot of water to evaporation. So what ends up happening is you end up concentrating the remaining liquid, but proofs go up pretty significantly in dry climates. And so when we pull that whiskey out, it'll be 132, somewhere around there. And so we proof it back to its original 120. And then we offer that out there all the time. That's part of our core lineup, is that 120 proof. And then where you see the proofs that are all over the board, that'll be under that other label, that paper label. So you'll find things out there, and those were bottled at just whatever they came out of the barrel at. And so you'll find some things. I think the biggest one I bottled recently was 152 proof, which they, the influencers call it hazmat out there, but I think that was 10-year-old wheat whiskey. So pretty small yield, not a lot of whiskey left in the barrel on that one, but yeah, we just offer that as that's our original barrel strength.
So it's interesting. How do the laws work on that? I've always wondered, because I thought cask strength meant no water added. It's just whatever comes out of the cask. But
It's a
Right, 'cause-
marketing term. There isn't a legal thing.
for cask strength, there's no legal definition.
Nope.
Interesting. Because I know like foolproof was
Yeah,
I understood that that's like going into the cask and that's what you're pulling it out. That's the 114 or whatever. That's interesting. Okay.
And see, we don't
That's-
get anything that low, like 114. That wouldn't even be cask strength for us, just because everything starts at 120 and goes up in this climate. So
Yeah. Well then, we all took a vote for everybody's favorite expression of the night. Terry, you get the honor of guessing what you think was the favorite expression of tonight.
I got to go with cask strength.
All right. I love it when it's a night of trick questions. The favorite expression of tonight was tied. Triticale, Port Cask, Cask and Release, and Cask Strength took first place at 3 votes each. That's amazing. I haven't seen a spread like that in quite some times. There's usually one like runaway leader, maybe two, but wow, that's pretty much spread across the board. That's amazing.
Well,
Well done.
I guess it's good that there's not well, I guess wheat was the dog in this bunch. Everybody preferred the cask wheat, but yeah. Well, it's a good spread there.
I think when you do just a regular and then a cask strength version of it, the cask strength usually wins, but it shows that every one of your expressions has a market, has a different consumer, and everybody has something they liked. 2, they're all done well. They're different enough. Well done. That's really an interesting result. That's cool.
Terry, are you available in Louisiana or Mississippi?
Yeah, we do business in Mississippi. We're actually in Alabama. They carry bourbon, but they did just discontinue Triticale after I had like a good 3-year run with Triticale there, and then it fell below the sales threshold in Alabama. But we still have bourbon on the shelf there. And then Mississippi, yeah, we have distribution there through the liquor state control there. So stores are privately owned, so we're available there. Tennessee, Tennessee is a strong market for us, so we do a lot of business in Tennessee.
Okay, thank you.
We're trying to get to Florida, so Vadim's got my contact. He can share my contact with all you guys, and if you can't find something and you need us to hook you up, I can probably call you an influencer or something, and FedEx won't, try and throw me in jail or anything, but I used to I'll get these nasty grams from them occasionally. And since COVID, I don't get them anymore because I think COVID, like everybody was getting everything mail order. So they just really stopped paying attention because it was complete chaos. And I used to get these notices that would say, hey, it looks like you shipped liquor to a consumer in Utah. or consumer in, Mississippi. And that's against the law. If you do it again, we're going to suspend your shipping privileges completely. And since COVID, I don't get any more of those. And I literally ship whiskey to all of these, influencers around the country that get it at their residences, and nobody even bats an eye anymore. So if you guys don't have access locally and you want to order some whiskey, just give me a shout.
We don't ship any liquor. But we do ship a lot of olive oil and kombucha and
Yeah.
barbecue sauce.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was just gonna say.
Homemade
olive oil.
snow globes. I make
Yeah,
vinegars.
Lee.
From here, it's always like huckleberry syrup or something,
There you
some
go.
regional thing,
Jason will tell you, he once bought 3 gigantic cases of homemade vinegar from me. It was a very stressful week. Because if any of that didn't make it, we were both SOL.
I don't know. I know that for me in Florida, I get deliveries, all kinds of deliveries for various alcohol, wine and scotch, whiskey, whatever. So I'm not really sure why you can't get into Florida as far as delivery.
No, I think it's distribution, not delivery. And that's, the issue is distribution. And it's never the receiver, it's the sender that gets in trouble.
As
Yeah,
long as the adult signs, that's what they say. Quote,
okay.
olive
I've
oil.
sent a friend some fancy olive oil before.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I've shipped some olive oil as well.
One of these days, it's a constant battle, right? Because wine can ship direct in 42 states and no issues whatsoever. But the wine industry got there after 20 years of litigating and lobbying or more. So the spirit industry needs to get motivated to open those doors as well. So
The problem with that is too many people have their hand in the cookie jar to let it go.
well, it's the distributors they oppose it, even though it's such a small percentage. Even on the wine, it's like less than 5% of the wine sold in this country is actually direct to consumer. But the distributors, they always think it's I used to be a distributor. The distributors think, oh, this is the slippery slope. If I give an inch here on this, then, the next thing I know, everything's being shipped direct and I'm cut out of the loop on everything. So they'll fight tooth and nail, and they have, if you're Southern Wine Spirits, they're a $20 billion company now. So, they can afford to buy politicians everywhere they need to keep that, protect themselves, I guess. But unfortunately.
That's life. But thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic. I know it's nearing midnight on some of the East Coast. So I think we're gonna, unless there's other questions, we'll wrap up the official portion of it. And then we'll just hang out off cam. But thank you, Terry, for the lesson and the sharing the drinks with us. And thank you to the group for being here tonight. As always, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for joining us. And I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.